friend of mine. She is a wonderful person, and please put your hands together for Hillary Anker.
Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. It's an honor to be on this stage, and not for the usual reason of trying to be funny, which works out better sometimes than others. But I want to apologize for reading from my notes tonight. Normally we comedians try to time everything down to the second, and I decided I don't want to be rehearsed tonight. I want this to be the first time that I'm going through this story with you, and I think once I tell it, you'll understand why this would, it would be different if this is something I talked about a lot. So I'm here to talk about the bullshit way that Missouri approaches reproductive healthcare, and how it ensnared me and ensnared my family, and ensnares every one of us who interacts with us in different ways. Just people from different backgrounds doing all kinds of different things. My story is going to be about the loss of wanted pregnancies, and I want to be really clear that by talking about that, I do not want to pass any judgment on women who have terminated unwanted pregnancies, but rather to point that out, because it is part of the story that the lack of stigma, but yet still the way that we get ensnared into these policies. So my story begins in 2007 when I had a 3-year-old son, and I was happily pregnant again. And my husband and I, we both came from families of 2, and we always thought that 2 was the right number for us. So we went into what we thought was going to be a normal ultrasound. And the technician looked at all the scans and was quiet and said she needed to go get the doctor. And I said, well, before you go, can you tell me, is it a boy or a girl? And very joylessly, she said, boy. And when she left, my husband said, there's something wrong. And I didn't see that, but he said there was something wrong. And indeed, when the doctor came out, he let us know that the baby had what is called an encephalocele, which is a hole in the brain that let out a lot of the brain tissue. And he was brain dead, but he had a heartbeat. He was on life support effectively through the placenta. And the heartbeat turned out actually to be a big thing, because when we were told he's not going to live more than an hour outside the womb. If you engage in major surgical interventions, he might live for up to a year in constant pain and with no awareness. And so, but again, he had a heartbeat. And our OBGYN is just a deeply good person. And all these years later, we're still in touch. And he said that the heartbeat, the problem was it complicated things. To get the procedure necessary is called a DNA dilation and extraction. To remove the brain dead child from my body, I needed a cooling off period of 24 hours to make sure I didn't change my mind. I wasn't clear exactly what was going to change in those 24 hours, but the other problem is once that cooling off period was over, by Missouri law, there were only 2 days left to have this procedure before it was not even then, even that would not be legal in Missouri anymore. Before the cooling off period could begin, the doctor had to read me a statement about how there are always options to having an abortion. I didn't feel like I had a lot of options at that moment, but he still had to say it. And I should point out to you that the doctor was much more upset about this than I was. And I think it's because, unlike me, he knew what was coming. And he said, I have to read these exact words as written, but nothing in the law prevents me from adding some words of my own, which he did. So he inserted things before the worst of the statements. He said, it offends me to have to say, and then he said the thing. Or, I can't believe I am required to say that, and then he said the thing. It did soften the blow. Now we had just 3 days, had it just been 3 days later, right, the cooling off period and 2 more days, I would have had to travel elsewhere outside of Missouri for treatment, because this totalitarian state actually expected me to carry the baby to term and watch him die in my arms. And no matter what anyone thinks about abortion, I just have to say, if anyone thinks that is okay, then fuck you. I mean, that cannot be the right answer. Actually, one of the things that upset me about that expectation is, it's not that I didn't consider that path. I did consider that path. I stayed up all night reading the accounts of women who had carried children to term that they knew would not survive. And I admired these women. Their stories were more philosophical than religious. And they said things like, life is always finite. I mean, if we say that it's worthwhile to live a life for 90 years, why would we say it's not worthwhile to live a life for 9 months? And, where is that line? Where do you say this is worthwhile life and this is not a worthwhile life? And I thought a lot about it. If my child had only 4 months left to live, why shouldn't he have the best 4 months he could have? But I just didn't think I could do it. I had a job in Berkeley, California. I was living in St. Louis and flying back every week, every other week. And I just didn't think I was capable, in particular, of having to spend those 4 months correcting people every time they congratulated me. And truly, that brings me to the worst part of the whole experience. So I keep sometimes saying, oh, the worst part was this, the worst part, oh no, wait, the really worst part was that. But I think the very worst part really was about talking about it with other people. And this was a long time ago, and I feel comfortable talking about it with you all. But at the time, I did not want to talk about it. And the hard part there was that, when you have something tragic happen in your life, people all want to show that they're empathetic and they understand your tragedy. And you know how they're going to show it? They're going to tell you about the worst thing that ever happened to them. And now I'm fucking surrounded by sadness. And I don't want to put trauma on a scale, like how do you measure trauma? But some of the shit they told me was worse. Like, my department chair at Berkeley told me about how he lost his 3-year-old son. And my son was 3, and I just lost it. I mean, that's worse. I don't want to have a scale, but that's worse. So now I'm just surrounded by the worst thing of anything happened to everybody. And I'm breaking the news to people and managing their emotions and the expectations they have. And now, instead of them being there for me, I'm actually comforting other people when they hear these horrible news. And so there were all these insults to injury. My milk came in because I was so far along. And I needed to stop, obviously, the milk supply. And I could not find my breast pump from the first pregnancy. And so I went to a store that sold resources for pregnant women and newborns. And I went to the counter and said, I need to buy some herbs or some other kind of medicines for stopping my milk supply. And the person at the counter decided, instead of selling me those things, to try to persuade me to give breastfeeding a chance. Don't you want to, let's talk about why would you want to, and I said, well, actually the baby was stillborn. And she didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what to say, and I just burst into tears, and she held me. And I went to the 6-week postpartum doctor's appointment, and I had parted ways with a baby, so I went to the postpartum checkup, and the receptionist asked if I had any pictures, and I thought she must be talking to someone else. So I looked around, and there was no one else around, and I said, pictures of what? She said, the baby. Actually the baby died. And she lost it. She just burst into tears, and I went around the desk and held her and comforted her, and she said, at least he's in a better place. And I said, I don't know that. And when I got to the doctor's appointment, I said very matter-of-factly, you need to put a flag on the medical records because your office assistant is very stressed today. Right? Because you're in this mode, you're being there for others. There was so much I just didn't want to forget to say. So around that time, though, I really didn't want to forget to tell you about this. I became convinced the baby was still kicking. And I knew that could not possibly be true, right? The baby was gone, but it felt so real. I could even put my hand on my belly and feel it. So, and the feeling wouldn't go away. And so I actually went to Barnes Hospital and checked myself into the emergency psych ward because I had obviously a dissociative break and had lost my hold on reality. And they put me in a padded room where the only thing in the room was a clock on the wall that had metal bars over it, presumably to protect whoever was in the padded room from utilizing the glass of that clock. And the second hand moved, not continuously, but really herky-jerky every second, and it was really loud. And I spent a few hours just staring at that clock and really focusing on that second hand because I needed to distract myself from the baby who was still kicking. After a few hours, I had an OBGYN come down and talk to me, and he said, oh, actually, that's totally normal. No, it is really. It's the feeling of your uterus contracting back to size. You're fine. Yeah, you're free to go, lady. This was how I responded. He was actually really nice about it. I should say, lady, he was nice about it. It was really the people from the psychiatric emergency taking so long to actually ask somebody who had relevant medical expertise. She really is imagining that, right? Oh, no, actually. So then the other people I had to talk to about this who were horrible was the insurance company. So the baby still had a heartbeat, so it got classified as an elective abortion, which was not covered by my healthcare plan. And so I spent hours on the phone telling them that indeed the pregnancy had been wanted and I had not elected this, although it shouldn't fucking matter. It shouldn't matter. But it mattered to them. And so I talked to them about how I wanted this child. And I'm not sure to this day what words you can say to a customer service representative to persuade them that you wanted a child, but whatever words I was saying weren't working. So I would get calls from United Healthcare. I'd tell them to call Barnes Hospital, then Barnes would call, I'd tell them to call United Healthcare, and this went on for almost a year. And to this day, I'm actually not sure which of them gave up. Someone gave up because the call stopped, but for a year, I would just be minding my own business. I would just be doing something else entirely. And the phone would ring, and now whatever I was doing, I put it down and started just talking about dead babies. And it went on so long. So I joined a support group for pregnancy loss, and all of the couples there consoled themselves that some other couple had it worse. They all did. And they talked about it pretty openly. So, one couple learned that what happened to them was going to happen again if they ever tried again, and that was going to be their only experience of pregnancy. And I already had a healthy child, right? I was the only person in that group who had a healthy child already. One couple had a home birth that went wrong, and everyone blamed them. And that was horrible. And I didn't have that stigma, but they all agreed I had it worse. And they all agreed. And the reason was because I was flying back and forth. My husband lived here, and so I was alone. And everyone else had their partner with them, and they said, you're grieving alone. And so everyone, everyone was kind of voting. It felt like that. So 2 years passed, and we were pregnant again and had another loss again for a completely independent reason. The medical test showed there was no relationship, and yet the conditions were very similar in that the second boy had a blocked duct in his brain that made fluid build up and had washed away his brain tissue, but again, he had a heartbeat. So in this case, though, my life was in danger. I wasn't going to be able to carry him to term within 3 to 4 weeks. His head would have expanded to be too large to fit out of the birth canal, and 200 years ago, we just would have both died. When the doctor first told me the news, he left the room, and I decided to read the end of the article in People magazine that I had brought from the waiting room so that I could have just a few more minutes of life as I knew it. But again, we were up against that legal time limit, and this time the fastest appointment was at Planned Parenthood, who are awesome people. I just want to have a round of applause. What I liked especially about going there was that I was going to be around other women going through their own shit. No one's happy. I was looking around other people going through their own shit instead of being on a labor and delivery ward of a hospital, being around people with delivering healthy babies. I had to walk by the protesters, the Planned Parenthood protesters, and they yelled at me that I was a baby killer. And I thought about engaging them, but then I just didn't. And now this time I had to pay out of pocket because the Planned Parenthood, you pay them and you get reimbursed by your insurance company, and the insurance company would not pay me back. And we had all kinds of hours of conversations. Indeed, I wanted this baby. I could try try to prove it to you by the following methods. I had in between had some fertility treatment, which isn't how we got pregnant, but isn't that proof I wanted a child? Whatever it was, it didn't work. And so eventually I just availed the privilege of just being able to absorb the expense and have these fucking phone calls stop and just let go of the idea that I was going to get reimbursed this money. Now, knowing from the first time that I did not want to talk to every single person in the world, especially in my workplace, about what had happened, my husband and I actually got out ahead of this situation. Other than a few colleagues we were very close to, here's what we did. There's this guy who is a total busybody and we can't stand him. I hope if he ever sees this video, he will know what an asshole I think he is. But we told him what happened and we said, because he liked to be in the know about all the gossip at all times, so we said, we want you to tell everyone, but you've got to tell them at the end, they never want to talk about it. They never want to talk about it. No condolences, no flowers, no cards. Do not mention it ever at any time. Let them walk down the fucking hallway as if none of this had happened. Do not mention it ever unless they start the conversation first. And that was great. That was great. We could just not be surrounded by this conversation and find out the worst thing that ever happened to every single person in my office hallway. So after all this, almost 2 years later, I delivered my sweet little baby Harry, who is now 11 years old, and he's a beautiful baby. And for those of you in this room who've met him, he is primarily known for his fluorescent orange hair. This is actually true. He's easy to find in a crowd. It's like a safety feature. Especially, I don't know how many of you have kids or more than one kid, but the first kid, you're always like, where are they? And the second kid, you're like, I didn't kill the first kid. He's got to be around here somewhere. But his hair actually glows, so he's easy to find. It's making me a more relaxed mom. But the doctor, the same doctor who had seen us through all 3 pregnancies, asked me for a second copy of the birth announcement. He told me he wanted to put one on the corkboard like he always does, but he wanted to keep one for himself. And the reason is, he told me he was planning to leave WashU, to leave Missouri. And that one of the reasons for it was how he felt all those years later reading me that bullshit fucking statement from the totalitarian state of Missouri. And that somehow seeing me go through the birth of this beautiful, healthy child helped him feel ready to go, to leave this place. Because it was a happy ending for him, as well as for me. And, we don't think enough about how the doctors hurt. They're victims of this too. And they work so hard to become doctors, and they take this Hippocratic oath to help people, and then they're told to back the fuck off and not help people. So a few months ago, after Roe versus Wade fell, I emailed him to thank him for the kindness and respect that he showed us all those years ago, and how much it meant to us. And so, in ending my story, I just want to say that we need a big happy ending for all of our families, like we had the happy ending for mine, and we don't have that happy ending now for everyone, so we're going to have to fight for having that together. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time.